Hello, dear viewers. This is the Ruslan Belov channel, and in today's episode, we will examine the development of events in Ukraine as of December 8, 2025. The day turned out to be filled with numerous significant events, so I suggest we proceed directly to their discussion. Over the past few days, a whole series of critically important events related to the Ukrainian conflict has unfolded on the world stage. Moscow has been continuously carrying out intensive attacks on Ukrainian territory for 4 days, deploying hundreds of unmanned aerial vehicles and dozens of missile systems. The main target of these attacks is energy sector facilities. For example, today a video appeared in Russian media demonstrating the Chernihiv thermal power plant with a nearby gas-fired thermal power station. It is this gas station that has been subjected to drone attacks over the past several days. The sole objective of all these attacks is to force the Ukrainian side into compromises and acceptance of that peace proposal and agreement, which is currently being discussed in the Russian capital, Washington, and, of course, in Kiev. Over the past 4 days, an intensive round of meetings and negotiations took place in Miami, during which American representatives held dialogue with the Ukrainian delegation. The most surprising and unexpected moment was the statement made by the American president today. The head of the United States publicly announced that despite everything happening, despite the strikes on energy facilities, despite 4 days of negotiations in Miami between the USA and Ukraine, Zelensky has not even familiarized himself with the peace plan up to the present moment. This is truly a strange situation that is difficult to comprehend. How is it possible to ignore familiarization with this plan? It turns out that the Ukrainian president rejected it even before studying it. Naturally, the Ukrainian side attempted to find a way out of this awkward position because the situation truly looked embarrassing. In the morning, Zelensky's office issued a statement according to which, for communication security considerations, taking into account the possibility of eavesdropping, it was decided to transmit information exclusively during personal meetings. Therefore, it was decided not to inform Zelensky about these matters by phone or through the internet, but to organize a personal visit by the head of the delegation to Kiev for a confidential tête-à-tête conversation with the president. Now let's move on to analyzing the ground situation, starting with the Zaporizhzhia sector of the front. Today, numerous news items are coming from there. The battle map has undergone significant changes. Let's examine what corrections have been made. Let's start with the western Zaporizhzhia direction. Today, a number of analysts, predominantly of pro-Russian orientation, report the complete clearing of the settlement of Stepnogorsk. I remind you that Ukrainian forces held the central stronghold in the northern part of this settlement for a prolonged time, but apparently today it was captured. This is how the map looked just yesterday, December 7, 2025. Today the map has already acquired a different appearance. In addition, today individual pro-Russian analysts claim that Russian formations managed to advance significantly across open terrain. Yesterday the map had this appearance. Today it acquires these contours. That is, according to data from individual cartographic resources, after the capture of Stepnogorsk, Russian troops intensified their offensive in the direction of the settlements of Pavlovka and Lukyanovska. Forest belts and fields came under the control of Russian formations. Overall, offensive operations in this sector are quite logical. At present, the Russian army controls the settlement of Stepnogorsk, and it is obvious that in the near future, Russian troops will strive to straighten the front line along the line Malye-Sherbaki, Pavlovka, Lukyanovske, Stepnogorsk. A road runs here, a supply system can be established here, and essentially this is an optimal bridgehead before further advancement eastward to the settlement of Orikhiv, where the Russian army will be able to emerge in the rear of the Ukrainian grouping defending this settlement. From the Orikhiv direction, the main news today is coming from the southern territory. Today, the Russian military department informs that the Dnieper troops grouping has completely cleared the settlement of Novodanilivka. Today, this information appeared in another Ministry of Defense report. However, by the end of December 8th, no video confirmations were published by which one could establish where exactly Russian formations are deployed, whether the village is completely cleared, where Russian flags were raised. Such materials are absent for now, so we are making corrections to the map approximately. In the Novodanilivka area, Probably, in the near future, the map will still be corrected back, at least in individual sections. Perhaps some northern streets or northern buildings of the village of Novodanilivka are still being held by the AFU. I also remind you that several weeks ago, information was received about the complete clearing of the settlement of Mala Tokmachka, although subsequently the map was corrected in the opposite direction. But overall, at the present moment, a fairly clear picture is already forming. The battle for Orikhiv will unfold in 2026, and definitely this battle will begin in the first half, or probably in the first quarter of 2026. Numerous news items are also coming from the territory of the settlement of Huliaipol. Today, some analysts and cartographic resources claim that the Russian army already completely controls the northern and eastern parts of the settlement. We're talking about those parts of Huliaipol that are located on the Russian side of the Hychel River. This is the first phase of the battle for Huliaipol, not the most difficult phase. This is the initial stage when the Russian army strives to establish a foothold. And apparently, establishing a foothold has succeeded. Ahead lies the most difficult stage, forcing the Hychel River. When exactly the Russian army will force the river is difficult to predict. But if Russian formations manage to force the river and establish themselves on the Ukrainian side, then it will be possible to start the countdown. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk direction, from which numerous important news items are also coming. As you can see, the map has undergone substantial changes. This is how the map looked on December 7th. Literally on December 7th, the Russian army reports the clearing of the settlement of Rivne. Today, by the way, video materials about combat operations for this village were published. However, it has not yet been possible to geolocate individual episodes. And there is much information regarding the improvement of positions of Russian formations around the perimeter, both in Mirnograd and north and northwest of Pokrovsk. Let's start with Mirnograd, with its southern part. Today, information is coming that the Russian army managed to clear the southern part almost completely. This information is confirmed today by pro-Ukrainian cartographic resources, and video material was also published. In these frames, we can observe FPV drone strikes on positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation at this point. Based on these frames, we are making a small correction. However, we see that in the southern part of the Mirnograd pocket, there still exists a fairly extensive grey zone, the status of which at this stage is still unclear. In the northern part, information is coming that Russian formations continue to strengthen their positions between Olympijska Street, the settlement of Svitle, and the city of Pokrovsk. This is how the map looked on December 7th. This is the map already for December 8th. Russian formations continue clearing strongpoints, expanding the bridgehead before further advancement deep into the Donetsk region. Also today, information is coming about the expansion of the control zone in the southeastern part of the settlement of Hrodivka. The Russian army is actively advancing, according to various pro-Russian analysts. Next, we move toward the settlement of Dobropilya, to the Dobropilya direction. Today, video materials from the territory of the settlement of Rodinske were also published. In these frames, we see how Ukrainian FPV drone operators attempt to strike the equipment of the Russian army, which was conducting assault operations in this direction, in this sector. Some episodes were recorded on the territory of Rodinske. Based on this video material, the map underwent changes. This is how the map looked just yesterday. Today the map already looks like this. Based on all previously received data, one can conclude that by the end of December 8th, the Russian army established control over more than 80% of the settlement of Rodinske, and combat operations for this territory are approaching a logical conclusion. Next, we move to the Kostiantynivka direction, from which very important news is coming from the northeastern sector. Today, the Russian military department reports that the village of Chervony was cleared by the South Troops grouping, again for now without providing video confirmations. This is how the map looked just yesterday, December 7th. Only yesterday did information arrive about the expansion of the Russian army's presence in the southeastern part of Kostiantynivka, and already today information is coming about the clearing of Chervony. That is, I remind you that over the past 10 days, specifically in this direction, that is, north and northeast of Kostiantynivka, Russian formations managed to clear such settlements as Bezimena, Klinova, as well as Chervony, strengthen their positions on the territory of the settlement of Verolyubivka, and also clear the southeastern part of Kostiantynivka. That is, based on all this data, we can conclude that the main strike toward the settlement of Kostiantynivka will be delivered and is being delivered from the north and northeast, and not from the south and southeast, as was previously assumed. Next, we move to the Severesk direction, from which important news is also coming. Today, the main video materials are coming to us from the territory of the city of Severesk. And apparently, combat operations for this settlement are also approaching a logical conclusion. I remind you that several days ago, more precisely yesterday, a video was published from the area of School Number 1. In these frames, we could observe how Ukrainian FPV drone operators strike a Russian flag in this part of the city. That is, this episode, this building, this structure was geolocated. It was precisely at this point that the strike was delivered. And just yesterday we were asking ourselves the question, what is happening on the territory of the city of Severesk? Either the flag was installed with the help of a drone, or indeed combat operations are approaching completion. We were asking ourselves these questions yesterday, but today we received answers to these questions. And the answer is simple. The Russian army indeed broke through the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine, and at the present moment apparently the final stage of clearing is already underway. Today, Ukrainian sources from the 54th Brigade published this video, and in these frames we can observe how Ukrainian FPV drone operators strike positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in different parts of the city of Severesk. Here's a strike on Russian assault troops who are trying to occupy positions under a bridge. This building was geolocated. This bridge, more precisely, was geolocated. It was precisely at this point that the strike was delivered. And we see that Russian formations in the area of the Bakhmutka River were attempting to force the river in order to emerge on the western outskirts of the city of Severesk and effectively complete this battle. Ukrainian operators were trying in every way to slow down the advancement of the Russian army. We believe that within the next 1 to 2 weeks, the Russian military department will confirm full control over Severesk, which indicates the beginning of combat operations for the settlements of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. On the Lyman direction, no changes. The main combat operations are developing in the east, southeast, in the area of the intersection of the railway line and the T0513 highway. The Ukrainian side constantly attempts to counterattack in order to contain Russian formations in the Lyman forest. However, the Russian army is gradually advancing. On the Kupiansk direction, no changes. In the northeastern part of Kharkiv Oblast, also no changes. Today, footage was published from the area of the Pecheneg Reservoir, and in this photograph we see the consequences of a strike on a crossing in the area of the Pecheneg Reservoir. We see that the Russian side is trying in every way to reduce the logistics potential of the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction, in order to apparently increase the pace of offensive operations in the northeastern part of Kharkiv Oblast. And that's all, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.